N, on the other hand, takes a little bit of calculation. Not really that much, just a little bit. Because we have to figure out, which N are we talking about here? The 5. 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. The floor of 2.5 is 2. Very good. Excellent. So now we can go into the subroutine again, starting from the beginning. Every time you invoke a subroutine, you start from the very beginning of the subroutine. In this case, line 3 is the first line that has action. So once again, we ask the question, is n less than 2? Nope, it is not, because 2 is not less than 2. Then we go to line 6 again, and we do exactly the same thing. We invoke S1 again. So once again, we need to allocate one column for return line number, one for n. The return line number, once again, is 7. And the n this time is what? What is 2 divided by 1? Excuse me, 2 divided by 2 is 1. The floor of 1 is 1. Okay, very good. So then we go into the subroutine again, starting from the beginning, which is line 3. Okay, you will see the deallocation. The deallocation happens only after we get all the way to the deepest part of the recursion. So in this case, we ask the question, is n less than 2? Yep, it is, because n has a value of 1 this time. That means we don't go to line 6 anymore, we just go to line 4. Line 4 is easy. It just prints the value of n out. So in this case, it prints 1. Then we move on. There's nothing else after the then branch, so we get out of the conditional statement. We reach line 9 at this point, which is the end of the subroutine. And as usual, we deallocate the columns that we allocated for this invocation, and then we use the return line number to tell us where to continue execution. Tells us to go back to line 7. Fine, we'll go back to line 7. Line 7 says we want to print n mod 2. So the question now is, which n am I talking about? Column G, right, because column I is already gone at this point, so we are using column G. Column G has a value of 2. What is 2 mod 2? 2 mod 2 is 0. And we are done with line 7. After line 7, we get out of the conditional statement. We go to the end of the subroutine on line 9. And same thing happens here. We deallocate these two columns. And then we go back to line 7, because return line number of column 7 tells us to go back to line 7 of the pseudocode. Line 7 of the pseudocode, once again, wants to calculate what is n mod 2. This time n is 5. 5 mod 2 is 1. Okay, because it's 5 divided, it's the remainder of 5 divided by 2, and that's 1. After line 7, we go to line 9. Once again, we deallocate the columns here. And the return line number tells me to go back to line 12. Here we are on line 12. Line 12 is also the end of a subroutine, which means it is time to deallocate the remaining column. And the return line number tells me to go back to post. Once we are at post, we are done. Okay.
I kind of put print all this in the brackets in the columns like it goes. Like print 1 in this column H, it would be here. And then
you have to indicate what you're printing at some point. In other words, okay, there are two things that are important. One is, did you set up, these cells correctly? That would be the first question. If you set up these cells correctly, then you will have some points, okay, partial credit because of that. And then the next one would be, did you deallocate the columns correctly? And did you somehow, somewhere, tell me what you're printing on line 4, line 7, and 7? Okay, you guys have a question?
Yeah, you want to pull up my homework?
No, not now. Okay, let's focus on what we are talking about, because, that's...
I'm focused on just...
Focus on your own submission, right?
Yeah, it's like 50 points.
Well, that's out of your control right now, so let's just focus on the solution, okay?
Yeah,
Okay. Any other questions about this homework assignment? Yes?
When you press 1 at
Line 17,
Yeah, B17.
this one?
Yeah.
Because
5 mod.
because 5 mod 2.
It's 0.5.
What?
Is it? Why it's one? Like it's 2.5, right?
It's not floor. It's mod.
No, it's printing 5 mod 2. 5 mod 2 is the remainder of 5 divided by 2. We talked about mod.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about mod, we talked about floor. Yep. Okay. Any other questions with this one? This is the easy one. Let's move on. The next one is a little bit more challenging. So let's go to the next one. And here we have the other subroutine recursive. And this one, for people who traced it correctly, you will see that it computes the square of n. That's basically what it does. It is a little bit more involved because it has, recursion, and not just recursion, it also has a return value to deal with, and not just that, it also has invoke it on the same line as a return, which makes it somewhat more confusing. Okay, and basically that's what we'll be focusing on today with both the homework assignment as well as the practice test for your final exam. So what we'll do is we'll save it first, as usual, just in case I lose it somehow. And then we just take a look at this one and see whether we can understand what it is saying. Okay, the first line is invoke main. Inside main, it prints the value of invoking S2 using 3 as the argument of n as a parameter. So once again, 3 is called an argument because it is used to specify a parameter. N is a parameter because it is specified so by the subroutine itself. The subroutine will check whether n equals to 0. If that is the case, it will return just 0. Otherwise, it will return the invocation of S2 again, but this time with n minus 1 passed to n, plus 2 times n minus 1. So the entire expression will be evaluated and be returned. So let's go ahead and take a look at the trace. Now this one is a little bit more tricky because there are two things before we even talk about it. There will be two things you have to pay attention to. One is what do you do when you hit the return statement? What do you do when you execute a return statement? That's the first thing. The second thing is what do you do at the end of a subroutine, particularly at the end of subroutine S2. Okay, so those two things are basically the source of confusions when people have problems with this code. And I will explain those again when we get to those points. We need comments, we need line number. There are no global variables, so the pre is easy. Line 12 invokes main. Main does not return a value, so return line number is fine. And it goes back to post. The only line in the main subroutine that is useful is line 10. Line 10 is invoking S2, passing 3 to n. So at this point, we have to switch to use return info because the invocation is not basically on its own on a single line. It is a component of a print statement. Okay, we cannot use print return line number anymore because when we return from S2, there's something else on the line that we have to do. So that's why we have to use a return info cell instead of a return line number, because we have to come back to line 10 again to continue and finish up the printing portion of that statement. So that's why when we specify the return info cell, we specify this is line 10. When we come back, there's still the print statement to perform. The invocation, on the other hand, is now replaced by a single question mark because the question mark is a placeholder of the return value that will be calculated later on. That's the whole reason why we switch from return line number to return info, because return info gives you more detail as to when we are done with the subroutine, what do we do? Okay, and we also have to set up parameter n because we are invoking S2. N in this case has a value of 3 because that's what the invocation is specifying. Are we doing okay with the setup of columns D and E? Okay. Then we move on and continue execution inside the subroutine starting on line 3. Line 3 is asking, does n equal to 0? No, it does not. N has a value of 3. So what we do is we go to the else branch, which is on line 6. Line 6 is a return statement. Can I do the return now? Like right away? No, because
Find it.
Still a question to find.
exactly, because I don't know what invoke S2 n minus 1 goes to n is going to be about. So we need to invoke S2 again. When we come back, then we can finish up the calculation, right? So that means I have to invoke S2 again. Every time I invoke S2, I have to allocate these two columns. And let me split the screen so we can see this part and this part a little bit more easily, like that. Okay, let's deal with n first. So that's the easier part. It looks a little bit confusing because we are using n to specify n. The n minus 1 on the left-hand side is the argument. The argument is always using the current context. My current context is column D and column E, which means the n of the n minus 1 has a value of 3. 3 minus 1 is 2, so that means the new context that I'm setting up right now will have n equal to 2. Okay? The return info, on the other hand, is really not too bad. You just have to kind of focus on what you have to do. When we come back, we'll still be on line 6. The return operation will have to be performed at that time. The invocation of S2 is replaced by a single question mark as a placeholder. I still have to perform adding 2 times n minus 1 after that.
You actually show the whole statement with question marks there. You look like return.
Hmm?
That's what I don't remember you writing return anywhere on the notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I've
can
seen it.
remember that too.
It's in factorial
Yeah,
by
the
value.
It was in there.
It's
Return was in there.
factorial by value
It was in there.
in notes from the 19.
Well, that's okay. We can look it up. Instead of looking up the video, which is going to be kind of troublesome,
Yeah.
I'm going to look up the files that we upload.
Yeah, it was in the latest.
I think we talked about it, because otherwise I won't give you an assignment like
It
that.
was in there. Yeah.
Talked about it, you just didn't write return.
Yeah, there's Fibonacci too. I mean, the Fibonacci is even worse than that, right? I mean, yeah. So we have factorial, and then we have Fibonacci. Let's look at one first, and then we'll look at the other one. And in the trace, we have just that.
Oh, maybe I did write that on my assignment.
Okay, it's not too late. We still have 1 week before the final exam, so that's why I do not like it when they have I think the week before the 19th was a holiday for this class, and then Thanksgiving was also a holiday for this class, and that's why I do not like that, because with 2 weeks in between, it's just brutal in terms of retaining what we have learned in the class. But we have talked about that in this class. If you look into the other one, which is Fibonacci, that's even more nasty. Because in this case, we have 2 invokes on the same line, but it works pretty much the same way. You just have to resolve one at a time, starting from the left-hand side.